Environmental racism refers to the disproportionate exposure of marginalized communities, particularly communities of color and low-income communities, to environmental hazards and pollution. Environmental pollution refers to the release of harmful substances into the environment that can negatively impact human health, wildlife, and the ecosystem as a whole. The causes of environmental racism and pollution are often linked, as marginalized communities are more likely to be located in areas with high levels of pollution due to discriminatory policies and practices that concentrate these communities in certain geographic areas. For example, redlining practices and discriminatory housing policies in the U.S. have resulted in the concentration of communities of color in areas with high levels of pollution, such as industrial zones and areas near highways and ports. The consequences of environmental racism and pollution can be severe and wide-ranging. Marginalized communities are often exposed to higher levels of pollution, leading to high rates of pollution-related illnesses such as asthma, cancer, and other health problems. Additionally, pollution can harm the environment, leading to declining wildlife populations, reduced air and water quality, and other negative impacts on the ecosystem as a whole. The Port of Long Beach, located in California, is one of the largest container ports in the world, with a significant impact on the economy of the region. However, the port and the surrounding Harbor District neighborhood have also been the site of environmental pollution and racial inequalities. Historically, this site has been home to low-income communities of color, including Black, Latino, and Southeast Asian populations. These communities have experienced disproportionate exposure to environmental hazards, including pollution from the port, rail yards, and truck traffic. The environmental impact of the ports extends beyond air pollution. The port's operations contribute to ocean acidification, which harms marine life and can have ripple effects on the local fishing industry. The transportation of goods through the port also contributes to greenhouse gas emissions, exacerbating climate change. The Harbor District has a rich history linked to the port's development. Originally, it was inhabited by the Tongva people. Spanish explorers arrived in the 16th century, and later it became part of Mexico and the U.S. The construction of a breakwater in the late 19th century helped expand shipping and commerce. The Long Beach Freeway and Vincent Thomas Bridge further boosted the area's importance as a center of industry and trade. The Harbor District neighborhood near the Port of Long Beach is a prime example of environmental racism due to its history of being home to low-income communities of color who are disproportionately exposed to harmful pollutants from nearby industries. Poverty has played a significant role in shaping the location of this environmental justice issue, as low-income communities often lack the resources and political power to influence decision-making around environmental policies. And poverty also limits access to resources such as healthcare and education, which can exacerbate the health impacts of pollution on marginalized communities. This concentration of pollution in the Harbor District has led to higher rates of pollution-related illnesses and economic impacts, including decreased property rates and increased healthcare costs. Working-class people and workers are particularly impacted by environmental racism and pollution, as they are often disproportionately exposed to environmental hazards, such as air and water pollution, due to the location of polluting facilities and industries in their neighborhoods. Workers may be at increased risk of exposure to environmental hazards in the workplace, depending on the industry they work in. Some companies exploit environmental pollution and racism by locating polluting facilities in low-income and minority communities to reduce operating costs and increase profits. Industries like fossil fuels can harm low-income communities and people of color, but still profit from their operations. Additionally, communities benefit from systemic racism by exploiting low-wage workers who are often people of color. Efforts have been made to address these issues, including the implementation of the Clean Air Act plan in 2016, which has reduced air pollution from port-related activities. Additionally, community organizations and advocacy groups have worked to raise awareness about the impacts of pollution on the Harbor District neighborhood and push for policy changes. Community members, environmental activists, and organizations fight environmental injustice by advocating for policy changes, community organizing, and legal actions. They aim to promote social and environmental justice by advocating for regulations, clean energy policies, and strengthen environmental impact assessments. They also take legal action against polluters to hold them accountable for environmental damage. Pello argues that environmental justice requires a more comprehensive and interdisciplinary approach that takes into account the ways in which social, economic, and political factors intersect with environmental issues. The case of the Harbor District illustrates the importance of considering the broader context of systemic inequalities and power imbalances that shape the distribution of environmental benefits and hazards. By examining environmental racism and pollution at the Port of Long Beach through the lens of Pello's articles, we can better understand the complex ways in which environmental injustices are perpetuated and how they can be addressed through more inclusive and democratic decision-making processes. To support environmental justice in the Harbor District neighborhood and beyond, it's important to focus on systemic change. Here are some ways that you can take action. 1. Support community-led organizations. 2. Advocate for policy change. 3. Support worker rights. 4. Educate yourself and others. And 5. Engage in direct action.